market segment, interconnecting approximately 8 megawatts per month and as high as 10 megawatts per month on a few occasions. So our goal in hosting this webinar is to provide you with information that will assist in your continued success and hopefully make it easier to work with National Grid. So I'm looking forward to it, and thank you again for joining us today. George?
Thank you very much, Matt, and thanks for joining. Appreciate your commitment to the process. We at National Grid always start with a safety message, and Mark Dre is going to be presenting that for us today.
Thank you, George. Just doing a quick audio check. Am I coming across okay?
Sounds terrific.
All right, thanks. So our safety reminder today focuses on beach and in particular rip current safety. While beaches are certainly places for relaxation and vacation, they may pose life-threatening dangers. Great weather for the beach does not always mean it's safe to swim or even play in the shallows. Rip currents often form on calm, sunny days. Beaches all along this United States coastline pose an often unexpected threat to beachgoers. So rip currents are narrow channels of powerful, fast-moving water. They are prevalent along the east, west, and Gulf Coast of the United States, and are even common along the shores of the Great Lakes. They can occur on any beach where there are breaking waves. The picture here shows a beach where they actually added dye into the water to show more clearly where the rip is and how it's flowing. So you can see the rip current in the center of the picture, where there is foam and sediment and discolored water extending away from the shore. So obviously this picture is taken from high up. So when you show up at the beach, you want to try and do the same thing. Don't just go down to the water, but stand back, get away from the water's edge, maybe up on a beach access, somewhere higher up where you can see the water's surface clearly, as that makes it easier to identify a rip. Typical characteristics for a rip are anywhere from 15 to 100 meters wide. So that's from the width of a couple lane highway to the length of a football field. And they can extend offshore anywhere from 100 to 400 meters. So again, that would be the length of a football field to, in extreme cases, maybe a quarter of a mile. The speeds of rip currents can get up to about 8 feet per second or about 5 miles per hour. Now, I realize for many people that doesn't sound that fast, but not even a gold medalist Olympic swimmer could outswim that current. In terms of what conditions lead to hazardous rips, it's not just really big waves that drive rips. You can have rips with waves of only 2 to 3 feet. And rips tend to be strongest at low tide. So when you go to the beach and it seems like a nice day and the waves aren't that big, you still have to be aware of potential rip currents, especially if it's low tide and you see waves breaking over a sandbar near shore. Rip currents account for about 80% of beach rescues every year, with lifeguards rescuing tens of thousands of people. And sadly, about 100 people die each year while struggling against rip currents. So at the bottom of the screen here, we have some safety guidelines and advice on how to avoid rip current encounters. These are provided by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You want to prepare by checking local forecasts and conditions before going to the beach. You should swim near lifeguards and ask them about safety concerns and conditions. Keep an eye out for warning flags on the beach. Assess your swimming ability before venturing too deeply into the water, and in other words, know your limits. If you do find yourself being pulled out by a rip current, it is important to stay calm. The current will not pull you under the water, but it will push you further out into the ocean. So again, the advice from the experts are to stay calm and assess your conditions. Don't try to fight against the current by trying to swim back toward the shore. You will quickly become exhausted. Instead, float and swim parallel to the shore, and eventually you will escape the current. If you're unable to swim parallel to the shore, then wave and call for lifeguard support. So just to summarize, the best strategies to avoid rip currents are to swim at lifeguard protected beaches, be aware of rip current conditions, don't enter unsafe waters, and know how to escape a rip current should you find yourself caught in one. I hope this information helps you to make your next trip to the beach a safe one. And with that, I'll turn it back to George.
So we are going to just flash up on the screen here a quick disclaimer. This is our standard disclaimer that if you've participated in any of our complex webinars, take a second to review that. Move on. All right, and we'll move. Are worth pointing out. I know that there's been a lot of questions actually. Taylor, if we could just move to the general communications tab, that'd be great. So I know a lot of people have been asking about the 25 kW net metering exemption and when that's going to happen. So far, we haven't implemented any changes. None of the other utilities have yet either. We're still waiting the department approval on that. And at that time, the tariff will be updated to reflect it. So for the time being, all the interconnection requirements will remain the same. Doesn't affect the threshold of simplified process at all. USB 1741, UL 1741 SB inverters. Just a reminder that applications submitted after October 1st, 2023 will need to comply with the UL 1741 SB certification. I know that in the expedited world and complex, it's already been going on, but for even residential customers, that will be the case. So if you're sitting on any applications that you haven't submitted yet that are going to use SA inverters, get those in before or the latest September 30th, because on October 1st, we won't be accepting those anymore. We have noticed an increase in the as-builts, not necessarily matching what we initially approved in the conditional approval process. You probably want to let us know ahead of that time, because that will delay your application processing. When you submit a change, we do have a change review process, and I believe that Jesse is going to be going over that later in our presentation, but it does cause delays for you because we have to rescreen it and verify the system size against the aggregation of DG all being served on that particular line section. So to avoid any type of delay, it's always best to submit your as-builts at the same size or smaller than what you initially submitted. A good end of year reminder, because believe it or not, we're already halfway through 2023. If you're trying to get your application interconnected before the end of the year, you should try to have all of your completion documents to us no later than December 1st. That'll allow us time to get through the completion documents, review everything, get a meter ordered, and get a meter set. And one theme that you're going to hear through all of this is, please do not begin constructing a system on whether it's residential, small, commercial, until you've received conditional approval. There is an increased, because of the volume, there is an increased number of applications that do require system modification. So we don't want you to get caught in a position where you thought you were going to be all set, and then you have an unexpected system modification ISA that could mess things up for you. So with that, we'll move on to the simplified review process with Jesse. I'm going to shut my camera off not to take up too much bandwidth. As a reminder, there is a link posted in the chat for any questions that you may have. Feel free to use that link to submit any questions, and we'll make sure that we get answers for you. All yours, Jesse.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Souza. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of working with, I'm Jorge. I go by JJ. I'm the Massachusetts screening team lead, and we perform all the technical reviews for any proposed projects here through the simplified, expedited, and standard paths at National Grid. I'm going to elaborate a bit on the UL 1741 supplement SB requirement that was just mentioned by Mr. Souza in our general communications. So for any applications less than a megawatt, National Grid will begin requiring that every inverter that is a non-CHP generating equipment to be UL 1741 SB certified. The SB supplement is an updated version. It incorporates the additional testing requirements found in the IEEE 1547. Any applications submitted after September 30th or on October 1st will require that SB 1741 certification for all proposed equipment. If that is not provided, those projects will then be placed on a hold. Please refer to our TSRG website for any further information, inverter sourcing requirements, and our ESP 756 for all of those additional technical requirements. I'm going to hand this off to Jesse for the simplified review process.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ. Audio check.
Yes, ma'am. I'm clear.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Happy little Friday, as I like to call Thursdays. My name is Yesenia Rosa. I also go by Jessie. I am the residential small commercial simplified process lead, and I work under George. Next slide, please. So I'll be going over the simplified process with you all this morning. The simplified criteria is UL listed 1741 SA, but as we know, starting later on in the year, it'll be SB inverter-based systems with power ratings of 15 kW or less on a single phase service on a radio feed, or inverter-based systems with power ratings of 25 kW or less on a three-phase service on a radio feed. The simplified process does not apply for non-listed inverters or other generators. That includes induction, synchronous, and asynchronous equipment, aggregate generation capacity of listed inverters that exceed the above mentioned limits, or projects that do not pass the simplified process screenings. Next slide, please. So the interconnection process steps are the following. So the case is submitted. We review that within 10 business days. Here you have the links for a couple of guidance and helpful documents, right, or pages on the GridForce site. Then you have conditional approval. That's when we review your case, we grant your conditional approval, you're now allowed to construct your system. If the system size changes after your conditional approval is provided, is granted, then you must enter in a change review. Do not install an inverter that has not been approved by National Grid for installation due to the increase of saturation in several locations across Massachusetts. Completion documents are then submitted after your system is built. That is reviewed within 10 business days. If your system has changed, let's say inverter size, anything changes, and you submit your completion documents and then you enter in a change review, that's going to hold your case up from showing in a queue for review. So we do ask that you submit your change review before you submit any completion documents so that we could go through that review process, and then we'll move on to the next step, which would be the review of the completion documents. After that's completed, we then order your meter. That also has a timeline of 10 business days to be set. And once that meter is set, you have your authority to interconnect. Next slide, please. Here we have the simplified review path. This just goes through, I'm not going to go through each line item here, but this just goes through every step that I just went through on the previous slide, but the number of days that it allows. And then at the bottom, I have a little note here. If you choose e-sign, the case is going to stay in draft status until the application is signed by the customer. So keep in mind that your case, you'll finalize the case, the agreements will send to the customer, but that case will still show as draft until those agreements are signed. Next slide, please. All right, here we'll go through some common holds and concerns that have to do with the simplified process. During your application stage, please ensure that you enter in the correct KWAC on your total nameplate rating field. This is going to drive your case through the correct path. So for example, if you have a a case with a system size of an inverter that's a 5.0 with a Tesla storage component that's also 5.0, you're going to enter 10.0 here. If you receive an error that the account number is invalid, this means that the account number is no longer active. So you may have to reach back out to your customer, write to the customer and ask them for an updated bill or an updated account number. If there's an existing system, please ensure that at triage, this information is entered. You may not always know the case number for that system, but if that system size is known and you do know that there is existing solar at the premise, please put that into the case when you're going through the triage questions, because again, this is going to ensure that your case goes through the correct path based on system size. The application in the case must match the customer's bill account, the name, the address, the account number, the meter number. So everything that's on the bill should match exactly on your documents, how it is on the bill. The customer billing account should be up to date and all obligations met and or cleared. All AC coupled storage should be noted on the application in the same section as the inverter. This is only needed for AC coupled storage. This is not needed for DC storage. Ensure that hold reasons are being addressed before resubmitting your case. In several situations and instances, we see that we put a case on hold for a particular reason, and then the case is resubmitted, but the hold hasn't been addressed. The same information is being resubmitted. Multiple application roles. We have noticed an increase in multiple application roles on cases. So we are asking that you do not multiply the application roles. When you enter your case, automatically your developer and application owner roles populate. Those should be left as is. They shouldn't be, the phone number or email shouldn't be changed, because I can trigger your case to not progress properly. And then you add your billing customer, your system owner, and if you have Mass Smart, you would add your electrician. The electrician role is not needed for net metering installs. Some common holds and concerns that we see during the conditional approval. If a Mass Smart case is complete, the service upgrade form. If it is a Mass Smart case, please complete the service upgrade form as soon as we provide you the conditional approval. That will allow us to then populate that work order number for you and give you that number in time for your completion document review, right? We'll be able to give you that number. And then once you have that inspector go out to the site to inspect the system, you have that number already ready for them. If the system changes are proposed after the original approval, enter in a change review. You'll hear me say this a couple of times through this slide. It's super important that you enter in the change review if anything changes on your case after that conditional approval is granted. Next slide, please. The initial application should be for the desired system size. Request to increase system size after conditional approval will require a new transformer check and may result in the withdrawal of your simplified case and a new application under the expedited process to determine the system modifications. And if there is a change to the account meter size or design, that change review must be entered because once we review the completion documents, if those documents don't match the approval, it's going straight to hold. During completion package reviews, have your inspection cleared. We do provide you a couple different ways, right, where that inspection could be cleared. And the most efficient way is for the wiring inspector to call in the work request group and select option 2 and clear the work order that way. Please ensure that Mass Smart is wired correctly. The line is on top to the utility meter where the load is on the bottom to the inverters and panels. Many times we see that the Mass Smart is wired upside down and that Mass Smart isn't counting the generation right on the solar for that customer. Meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes, so just keep that in mind when doing installations. And also equipment adapters are not allowed in a meter socket that has a National Grid meter. You could put it in a customer-owned meter and install it in a customer-owned meter, but that meter must be also labeled properly. If the case is started as Mass Smart and then removed from the Mass Smart program, again, enter in your change review so that we can update the case to reflect no mass smart. We can get that mass smart work order withdrawn and voided out for you. And then we'll have all those documents opened up so that you can update them to just net metering. Expansions of interconnected mass MA Smart projects are not allowed per the MA Smart tariff. So just keep that in mind. We do have some meter holds. So when our metering team goes out, right, to try to install the meter, some common holds that we have run into is that the mass smart meter isn't wired correctly, or that the solar system is wired to another meter or another account than what was applied for on the case. Also, something else that we see is for three-phase services, there should be a fifth terminal in both the utility meter socket and if there's mass smart in the mass smart socket as well. And of course, ensure the paths to the meter socket are clear of any trees, bushes, any debris, anything. The path should be clear for that meter worker. Next slide, please. So here I'll go over the change review process. Some reasons for change reviews, right? We see that the system size has changed. The name changes, the account becomes finalized. There's a different meter that the solar is tied to. You're removing mass smart or you're adding mass smart. So those are some of the different reasons why a change review may happen. If that does happen, you would go into your case, you select application, change application, I believe is what the button is called. You enter in your notes, what's changing. Once that happens, it pops into a queue. I suggest that you do chatter the team and let us know that you've entered in the change review. That way we get that chatter and we're able to open up those documents for you to submit the revised documents. Once you submit the revised documents, we go back in there, we review everything, make sure everything is up to par, and we give you that new conditional approval with whatever the change is. And the only time we actually provide the new conditional approval is if that size has changed. Next slide, please. And just to be clear on the three-phase service, if it is a three-phase 12208, you need 7 terminals. If it is a single-phase 12208, that's 5 terminals. Some concerns after cases interconnected. We do see that a lot of inquiries are coming up, right? Case has been interconnected, but now you want to add mass smart, or we're getting notified by clear result that mass smart has been withdrawn from that project. So when that happens, we do ask that you either, if you're going to convert the system from net metering to mass smart, know that only systems that have been operational on or after January 1, 2018 are allowed to convert to mass smart. When you're doing that, you would chatter the case. We would then go ahead and open up all the documents that need to be opened up. We'll add the mass smart fee, and we would go through the process as adding mass smart to that case, right? You'll get a work order, you'll pay the fee. We'll provide you the approval for adding that mass smart, and then you'll get that work order cleared, right? Once everything's been completed, we'll go out there and we'll install the mass smart meter. If you're removing mass smart, or we've been notified that mass smart has been removed from that premise, from that system, we would either, if we're being notified by clear result, we're going to reach out to you and the customer, let you know that we've been notified. And then we'll go through the process of removing the mass smart meter and removing and updating all the documents. Keep in mind, once the meter is removed, the system will not operate until it has been rewired to eliminate the mass smart socket or converted to a customer-owned meter socket with a customer-owned meter. The meter will not be provided by National Grid. This customer-owned meter does have to be provided by you or the installer. And a folder of the new configuration is required. So once we go through the process of updating everything and that meter is removed, you're either going to remove the socket or convert it, and then you would supply us with an updated photo. Next slide, please. Some more concerns that we've been seeing an increase in mixed meters. In some instances, we're finding the mixed meter. In others, you as a developer are letting us know that there might be a mixed meter situation. When that happens, we do have to go out there, right? We have to check what meter services, what account or what apartment, what unit, and then we fix the meter numbers right within our system. If that is the situation, again, we'll go through the process. We'll communicate via chatter, letting you know this is where we're at with the process. We've gone out, we're updated the information. Now we can move forward with ordering your meter or move forward with providing the conditional approval. And then right below here on the same page, we have the post interconnection page, right? And how you would contact us. So if you need to contact us for any reason, you would go into the homepage and then you hit the contact us button and put in your inquiry there, and that will come to us. Next slide, please. This slide just talks on the work order and the inspection that needs to be cleared for any mass smart orders. In many instances, you also have an upgrade order. You either have the upgrade order and the mass smart, or one or the other. So just please ensure that the work orders are cleared by the electrical inspector. You could view if this work order is cleared. If it is a mass smart work order, you could view this on the case under the related tab. If it is not a mass smart work order, you will not be able to view it in the case under the related tab. However, you could view it under the work request site. And so their site is called Electric Connections. So you'd be able to view it there. Next slide, please. Some common questions and concerns for residential storage. Both the solar and AC coupled storage are included in the system size. This goes back to my very first slide where I mentioned to put in the correct system size at triage. Storage is not included in the size for net metering eligibility. So if you have a 5 kW inverter, 5 kW Tesla, it equals 10 kW AC. However, it'll still fall under net metering because your inverter is 5. If in mass smart storage with net metered solar that charges from the grid cannot export to the grid. So please keep that in mind. If the system is participating in mass smart, all generation must be captured by the mass smart meter. The system should not be installed so it does not backfeed the system should be installed so it does not backfeed when the grid is down. And for net metering installs with DC coupled storage, the inverter cannot be derated on that install. So if you have an inverter with DC coupled storage and you want to derate that inverter, it's not allowed with the DC coupled storage. Next slide, please. Due to saturation, we are seeing an increase in simplified applications being moved to expedited. If during the infrastructure review, it is determined the proposed system size will exceed the recommended electrical capacity of the service transformer, there are two options. You reduce the system to be within the capacity remaining on that transformer, if there is capacity remaining, and if there is not, then you won't have that option and it would just be transitioned over to the expedited process. If you do have the option, you can let us know that you're going to reduce or that you want to continue with expedited. The expedited process includes a more comprehensive technical review. The technical review may identify national grid system modifications that are required to interconnect your system. The cost of the system modifications are the responsibility of the interconnecting customer, and the system modification cost cannot be determined until the case is reviewed via that path. Next slide, please. And a few process reminders. When entering your size, again, don't forget to enter the total case, KWAC, that includes AC coupled storage. For simplified cases, we've created a list of contacts. You could find this in Salesforce. You can just search chatter, how to chatter, something in regards to chatter, and the guidance document will come up. This guidance document is set up where you can chatter a representative on my team, depending on where your case status is at and what your question is. So we have representatives who work the application process and give you the conditional approval. Those representatives, you can chatter them and ask them questions if you have a case that's on hold for application review and hasn't been given the conditional approval yet. If you have something that's in the completion documents review process and you have questions around that, this guidance document will also give you the representatives who work that process and who to chatter. And again, I can't stress this enough. And please enter a change review if there has been any change to the case, the application, the applicant. If enrolled in MassMart, don't forget to the process does continue through clear result for the incentive. So you do have to provide them with, the payment forms for that customer, the MassMart meter email that we've set the meter and those documents. All inspections on the account must be cleared by the water inspector for us to order a meter. Billing issues, credit allocations, connected customer aftercare, please enter a post-interconnection inquiry. So if you have any questions, if you have any questions, or the customer has any questions in regards to their solar system, and they've already gone through their first and second bills, then yes, you want to enter in a post-interconnection inquiry. And then a couple of highlighted reminders. Please don't chatter any Mass representatives on Rhode Island cases and vice versa, as we are not allowed to assist on those cases. They're a different jurisdiction. They are now under a different entity, right? They're under PPL, Rhode Island Energy, and so we can't help you out. I do get a lot of chatters on Rhode Island cases myself, so we are asking that you please not chatter a Mass representative on a Rhode Island case, because we can't provide any information. And please withdraw your cases. Once you know that a case isn't moving forward, please go into the queue and withdraw it. This will help, open up the queue for other interconnections to come in. And that is the end of my slides. I am going to pass it off now to Dom. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jesse. Can you tell me if you can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. All right, so my name is Don McCann. I work here on this, I guess we can call it the Massachusetts Expedited Case Owner Team. And I'm going to run through some slides that should be beneficial for the expedited process for everybody. So expedited jobs, straightforward, anything greater on a single phase system greater than 15 kW or 3-phase greater than 25 kW. Those are just your basic expedited cases. And then kind of to the next level, any of the jobs that initially apply as simplified and do not pass the simplified screens will be pushed over to expedited jobs. Also, non-simplified projects that don't require an impact study is an expedited case. And just a quick reminder, the simplified section of this presentation can be reviewed for concerns and questions that would have the same impact on these residential systems that also fall under the expedited process. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is just our process steps. All jobs 250 kW or greater would require a pre-app, but for the majority of them under 250 kW, they do not require that pre-app. They just go straight to the app review. Job owners review the application review package. We send it over to the screening team. Screening team handles their assessment. They give all that information back to the job owners, which is where we need to enter all that information into the ISA. When we send out that ISA, that's the point of conditional approval. So we just ask that before that, so up until this point of conditional approval, you do not begin construction of the solar system. After that is taken care of, if there's company construction right to the transformer, that gets taken care of. Completion documents get uploaded. We review all the completion documents, order the meter, set the meter, and once that meter is set, we send out the authorization to interconnect email to turn the system on. Next slide, please. This is just our time frame, basically highlighting the fact that when you submit an application, we have 3 business days to acknowledge that receipt. We then have 10 days to review the application. The screening team has 25 days to make their assessment. 20 days would be added if there's a supplemental review. ISA drafting and sending the ISA we have 10 business days. So in total from submission to receiving conditional approval, that's going to be 45 business days or 65 if that supplemental review is required. And then for construction, of course, that's case by case. That timeline varies. And we can go to the next slide, please. So these are our main errors that we find in the application packages. The legal information document, we ask that that gets filled out completely with all required information and that you use version 2.2 now, which is the updated version, no longer 2.0. Our most common error we see is the one-line diagram does not have the Massachusetts PE stamp on it. Please make sure that is stamped, otherwise that gets put on hold. This next bullet point, basically, it goes for all cases, but we see it mainly with battery included projects. Make sure what you enter in the portal for your asset and all that information matches what you've entered in the documents, in all the packages. Next would be make sure that storage, charging, and discharging capability is noted on the one line. Many times when there's battery jobs, we don't see that labeled. That would force us to put our case on hold. And then lastly, when the case is in conditional approval, delivered pending customer decision, we just ask that you don't press that finalize submission button until that signed ISA is uploaded and we can properly move to the next step. Next slide, please. Common errors now for completion document package. For most or all expedited applications, that commissioning memo on a company letterhead will be provided in lieu of the witness test. That commissioning test should consist of the 2-second shutdown, 5-minute restart. You should confirm that the system matches the as-built and that the inverter relay frequency and trip sightings are listed in the chart below. Next slide, please. As-built. Make sure that PE stamp is on the as-built as well as previously in the app review for the one-line diagram. For the pictures, please make sure there's a permanent plaque visible at eye level that includes a warning about a generator being installed. Also, we need to see visibility to the utility meter number. Make sure it's the correct meter. If the AC utility disconnect switch is not grouped with and adjacent to the utility revenue meter, then a permanent plaque visible at eye level that clearly identifies the location of the AC utility disconnect would be required. And for inspections, all work orders on customers' accounts need to be cleared before we can order the meter. If they are not cleared, that would just hold up the meter order. Next slide, please. So evidence of insurance is required for all jobs greater than 60 kW in Mass. You can refer to the ISA and interconnection tariff for insurance requirements. Qualifying facility documents for all sizes. The Schedule A is required for all qualifying facility projects. And then when you get into jobs greater than 60 kW, we also ask that you supply a W-9 ACH supplier enrollment form and asset registration. Next slide. Just gonna go over some metering requirements and reminders. No outside equipment like adapters should be between the meter and the socket. Meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes. If there's a generation meter, please make sure that test meter is removed. We just want that blank socket. Projects greater than 60 kW in Massachusetts require interval metering. The company is going to need a 4G wireless signal test, Verizon network in order to provide wireless metering. Those phone lines need to be dedicated and terminated at the meter location, and they must be 100% copper. There's some communication issues with fiber lines. These interval meters can take a long time, so it's important that you work with your job owner well in advance of seeking interconnection. And then lastly here, just please make sure that the path to the meter location is clear, especially in the winter. Make sure it's shoveled, no lock on a gate. Make sure the techs have clear access to the meter. And I think that's the end of mine. So I'm going to pass this over to Nolan to talk about preliminary screening.
Thank you, Dom. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, thanks again, Dom. Hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nolan Rossi, and I'm on the preliminary screening team. I will be covering specific tasks performed during the preliminary screening of a submitted project. Taylor, can you go to that next slide for me? Beautiful. To begin, once an application is submitted for a project, there are several technical to be performed. The technical reviews are maintain the safety and reliability of our distribution system for all of our stakeholders and must abide by all DPU mandated tariff requirements. The transformer check is one of the first technical reviews of a submitted project. The transformer currently feeding the existing site or nearest to the proposed system has several checks, including the DER would be once the proposed system is interconnected. And lastly, checking the existing load to avoid any potential interconnection issues. Verify that upgrade secondary. We confirm that the proposed DER system will not exceed the DPU tariff mandated 20 kVA on any shared secondary. We also verify distances of the secondary conductors and the service drops, which we input into our tool to calculate the voltages across the secondary crib. This allows us to confirm and prevent any overvoltage issues on the system. And the second review. Next slide, please. So this slide is a visual representation of how a project can progress once the preliminary screening is finalized. If all preliminary screens pass, a project may proceed with additional requirements. If several options. The first two options will be the decision of the proposed project case owner. They will be notified and given the option to reduce the system size and update to avoid expedited path. The other decision they could make is to request the project remains as submitted and request to progress via the expedited path. The last option is that the proposed project will be required to progress via the expedited path because there are no options to proceed with additional technical review or system modifications. Next slide, please. So if the project needs to progress via the expedited path, it will undergo a detailed screening review where the need for potential system modifications or supplemental review will be identified. Once your project's path has been determined, any submitted documents that were submitted will be reviewed by the assigned simplified or expedited case owner. Application review checklist is depicted on checklist for any required documents for the simplified expedited application review process. Next slide, please. Beautiful. This slide and the next are the updated, simplified, and expedited application checklist. This will be available to everyone looking for additional guidance in submitting a project. This will be posted on our shareholder website very soon. The next slide has the final pages of the application checklist. And once again, next slide, please. I'm going to turn this presentation over to my colleague, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nolan. Mic check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Next slide, please, Taylor. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Fitzy. I work with Nolan on preliminary screenings. With expedited screenings, once an application is deemed to require any type of system modifications, supplemental review, or exceeds the simplified tariff thresholds, the proposed project will progress via the expedited path. During the expedited review path, we perform additional screenings and document reviews to determine the most feasible and least cost to serve options. Expedited reviews include additional document review for newly required documents, proposed system configuration review, distribution system review, proposed system modification review, and system modification estimation. Next slide, please. When determining system modifications, screening looks at the least cost to serve option. This option implements whatever the minimum system modifications could be while safely and reliably allowing interconnections to our distribution system. Some examples of potential system modifications could be secondary service drop replacement, secondary conductor reconfiguration or replacement, transformer replacement, as well as transformer installation, pole and anchor replacements and/or installation, and primary line extensions, which typically require supplemental review. Next slide, please. Now we're going to cover supplemental reviews. Supplemental reviews are an additional engineering study to evaluate the potential impact of the facility on the company's electrical power system. This allows us to determine any requirements for processing the application through the expedited process. If system modifications or upgrade estimates cannot be determined during the screening process, this is when we require the project to be sent to supplemental review. Several situations for supplemental review progression could be the additional review of a challenging or complex area, review of any underground area, or areas that require an on-site visit by our field engineering team, or projects that require complex system modifications with costly estimates. We finalize the screening with all necessary project notes and distribution system notes for our field engineering team to confirm and determine required system modifications and estimates. Supplemental reviews are progressed internally with the service work request number that is associated with the DG case number. Next slide, please. Once an expedited screening is finalized, the proposed projects are either issued conditional approval, progressed to supplemental review, or placed on hold behind an ongoing group study. If conditionally approved, your case owner will send out an interconnection service agreement, known as an ISA, within 10 business days of the completed screening. The ISA will have any potential system modifications and estimated costs to proceed with interconnection. If the project progresses via supplemental review, the case owner will reach out and inform the customer or developer that the project will need additional engineering review. Once the customer is notified and pays the required fee, the project will be progressed to commence the supplemental review. If the proposed project is in a group study area and exceeds the non-simplified tariff threshold, the project will need to be placed on hold behind the ongoing group study. And on the next slide, there is a visual representation of what we just discussed, the three potential options for project progression. And I'll just allow the group to take a few seconds to review that. Okay, that's okay. We can go to the next slide. All right, now here are some common reasons for screening review holds. Common hold reasons that we see could include document discrepancies, incorrect billing account number, missing service work request number, as well as missing UL 1741 SB certificates, as well as an incorrect or missing D rating or curtailment letter. In regards to one-line diagrams, some issues that we commonly see include inverter and interpreting device nameplate rating, relay settings, make, model, voltage, and current rating missing. As Dom mentioned as well, during the expedited portion, missing electrical engineering PE stamp, aggregate AC, kilowatt or kVA ratings of the entire proposed system, D rating, and curtailment method and associated notes. In regards to site plans, missing point of common coupling, company pole number, nearest to the proposed PCC, point of common coupling, as well as a note stating any metering and disconnects will need to be grouped, located outside, and 24/7 lockable and accessible in accordance with ESB 750 7.1.1. All equipment locations will need to be approved by National Grid prior to installation. And please refer to any previously depicted application review checklist, to the previously depicted application review checklist for further details on document submission. Next slide, please. And this slide will go over system guidelines and requirements. Please refer to our 750 and 756 ESBs regarding standalone systems and how they should be configured when proposing a new system off of an existing pad mount transformer. All mass smart systems require generation and in some instances, storage charge and discharge to be captured ahead of any loads. All expedited cases that need further study will need all the documentation required for standard projects. All final metering locations will be determined by the metering department and will be based upon existing service configuration. Work should not begin, as previously mentioned, until the metering department has approved final disconnect and meter locations on site with the electrician. I'll now pass this over to JJ to discuss group studies.
Thanks, Stacey. Mic check. Loud and clear.
Yep, you're good.
Thank you, sir. Hey, everyone. Good morning again. The group study portion of this presentation that I'm going to cover, it's going to relate solely to expedited projects. Any non-simplified project is subject to group study tariff requirements. Projects that fall in the simplified threshold of 15 kW AC single phase and 25 kW AC three phase are not subject to these group study requirements. These projects can proceed via the typical simplified interconnection path. Any projects that do fall into the expedited path but don't exceed the 15 kW AC single phase and 25 kW AC three phase ratings, what we like to call simplified plus, may also proceed via the typical expedited path without being subject to the group study requirements. If a project is proposed in an area with a group study and exceeds the simplified size thresholds that I just talked about above, that project could be required to participate in that group study. The project proposed in that area with an ongoing group study could be required to be placed on hold until the conclusion of that group study. The company will notify any customers or developers when that group study concludes. National Grid, in order to assist our residential customers, is now allowing R1 and R2 rate customer accounts to utilize a power control system to curtail system export, as long as that equipment is UL 1741 SP certified. The power control system can be utilized to avoid any system modifications if properly curtailed to that required export size. The power control system can also be utilized to avoid any group study by reducing the total system export to no more than that 15 kW AC single phase threshold. PCS curtailment cannot be utilized to export any more than 15 kW AC single phase and cannot be utilized for any systems with a total system size above 25 kW AC single phase. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read through this slide in its entirety, but right here on the slide, it's important to show the specific tariff language about the group study process. This section also covers the timeframes and interconnection track guidelines as specified and outlined in 3.4.1. This slide also includes near the bottom the link to view the company's group status map, where you can insert the address to determine if your product falls within a group study area. You can go right to the map and just insert the address, and there'll be details on that website that tell you, what the group study is, potential interconnections in that area for larger projects and things of that nature. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly cover derating and curtailment in the next few slides. Derating, as you see here, is the act of reducing or limiting the nameplate rating of a piece of equipment to operate at a level below its intended rating. We use the term derating very commonly with curtailing. And while they're similar, this presentation is learning about how we interpret the differences and how we utilize them when discussing our systems. Derating is done by the manufacturer on the inverter or generator of a system, which changes how much that piece of equipment can produce or export. And unlike curtailing, this changes the total output of that piece of equipment. When changing the nameplate rating of a piece of equipment, we consider that derating. When changing the system export capabilities, we consider that curtailment. And on the slide below is the language that covers the requirements for derating in our ASP 756, Section 7. Next slide, please. Curtailment is the act of reducing or restricting something. We utilize the term curtailment specifically when we discuss limiting system export. Limiting system export doesn't necessarily have to affect the system size. Curtailing a system is done through software and controls in a piece of equipment that National Grid is now allowing if it's UL 1741 SP certified. Currently, there are only 3 pieces of equipment that we've reviewed and have provided manufacturer letters, or that have provided manufacturer letters that confirm and follow our proper control, our power control system guidelines, as stated in the ESP 756. The 3 manufacturers that we've been dealing with the power control system have been Tesla, Generac, and Enphase. So our current practice is to allow projects with a total system size of 25 kW AC or less single phase to utilize curtailment to avoid any system modifications for that proposed project and avoid ongoing group studies. And again, that's for R1 and R2 residential rate customers. And right here is where the excerpt out of the ESP 756 7.6.13 that covers the import and export control for power control systems. National Grid is going to be looking to expand this section to allow what we just covered up to 25 kWAC single phase. Next slide, please. When someone is going to be utilizing derating or curtailment as part of their system, we're going to require several additional items. The first one being a derating or curtailment letter on a manufacturer's letterhead. This letter, specifically for the equipment needs, has to include the make, the model number, the voltage, the current, the original nameplate rating of that piece of equipment, and the curtailed rating of the inverter or piece of equipment that is being proposed to be utilized for that system. The letter needs to include the site information as well, with the address and the case number, and the specific method of derating and curtailment. For derating, it's typically a manufacturer software limitation. For curtailment, it's typically a power control system. That method needs to be depicted on that letter. That information needs to match all of the site plan and one-line information, and all letters need to note that the inverter or equipment output can only be adjusted by the manufacturer. Most of this information is already reviewed on one-line diagram submissions, but needs to be included with the additional derating or curtailment notes near the proposed inverter or storage equipment. There also needs to be clear and concise notes depicting original system or equipment size, with the derated or curtailed system size, and any equipment export changes with the method of derating or curtailment. And lastly, all of our proposed assets entered into our portal need to match what's on all the submitted documents. It's for accuracy purposes and to make sure that the aggregate sizes match up for all the systems progressing. This is going to include any smart hub or gateway utilizing a power control system that's going to be utilized as a site limiting protective function. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have a link that contains like the step-by-step how to create the protective function. I'm not going to go over it in any details. The protective function action is just going to reflect the piece of equipment that's utilized to curtail the system. It needs to be added to the assets with the system export size and will depictly correct the total aggregate system size in the portal. And I have a quick example here of how if you have a 25 kWAC system, but would like to avoid group study, you can add some sort of smart hub or gateway utilizing PCS that will only allow 15 kWAC of export. So by adding that additional asset in the portal, it'll show as a 25 kWAC generator nameplate, but it will only show as a total export of 15 kWAC aggregate. Next slide, please. And these next two slides are the step-by-step and how to propose that site limiting element function in our portal. Next slide, please. And that is all I have for group study and derating and curtailment as part of the expedited process. I'm going to hand this over to Marissa to quickly go over portal support and how to submit a case.
Yeah, I think we're actually going to, for the sake of time, and I apologize, Marissa, because I know you've been looking forward to this all week. I think we're going to just move forward to Jared, I believe is next, right? Let me just double check.
Yep, I'm next, George.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I am Jared Gregory. I am the lead analyst in program support. And today I'm going to be discussing billing after the customer has been connected. Next slide, please. So for net metering billing requirements, any renewable energy system any solar system less than or equal to 10 kW single phase or 25 kW three phase are eligible for net metering without a net metering cap allocation. Systems that are greater than 10 kW single phase or 25 kW three phase do require a net metering cap allocation from the Mass ACA. And I have a link here to the Mass ACA website. Without a net metering cap allocation, the account will default to a qualifying facility. I think we've already addressed the new exemption for Class 1 net metering facilities up to 25 kW. Currently, the company has not implemented any changes yet. We're awaiting DPU action for new net metering tariff, and interconnection requirements generally remain the same, but the company has adjusted threshold sizes for simplified process. Today, if two systems are installed on the same parcel of land, this is very critical, and they exceed the net metering requirements, the system that receives conditional approval first receives the net metering incentive. So here's just an example. You have two apartments on the same parcel of land. You have a 7 kW system installed in apartment 1 and a 5 kW system installed on the same parcel at apartment 2. Apartment 1 receives conditional approval on 5.1 and apartment 2 receives conditional approval on 5.2. Since both combine to exceed 10 kW, the first one, apartment 1, that's a 7 kW system, will actually get the net metering incentive, and apartment 2, because their conditional approval date is after apartment 1, they will fall under the qualifying facility incentive. And then on the bottom here, if two systems are installed behind the same meter and exceed the net metering requirements, then both systems will become the qualifying facility. Net metering cap approval will be required to become net metering again for that location. Next slide, please. So net metering Schedule Z allocation forms. Schedule Z is required when initially interconnecting the net metering system. Customers can elect to transfer all, some, or none of their credits to other accounts. Schedule Z form can be updated up to 4 times per calendar year. Today, net metering credits can only be transferred within a customer's load zone. To update a Schedule Z from a form, a case must be submitted through our portal by the billing account holder at the link attached here. A customer can submit a one-time Schedule Z to allocate an amount of banked unallocated credits to another account within their load zone. Just keep in mind this is only allowed for host to satellite accounts. If money is allocated to a satellite account that was too much, money cannot be returned back to the host, and money cannot move from one satellite account to another satellite account. It can only be moved from the host account to the satellite account. The different Schedule Z forms can be located here, along with a guide on how to fill out a Schedule Z form as well in the link below. Next slide. So how does the first bill get set up? Once you receive Authority to Interconnect, or ATI, you'll get that via email. The account will be set up to begin receiving its incentive. Setting up the account may take 1 to 3 billing cycles after the ATI date and is retroactive to the ATI date. If the account is participating in the SMART program, this is critical, there will be a delay between receiving your first net metering or qualifying facility bill
and your SMART incentive. You receive approval for the SMART program after your project has already been interconnected, and this can take several months depending on how quickly all documentation is being submitted to ClearResult, which is the third-party administrator for the SMART program. If your project is in blocks 1 through 8 under the SMART program, that incentive for SMART is retroactive to the ATI date. If the project is in blocks 9 through 16, you're only eligible for the SMART incentive for the next billing cycle after approval moving forward. Once approved for SMART, it also may take 3 billing cycles for an account to be set up. Next slide. So here what I have is I have a net metering bill example. A majority of your customers that you're interconnecting at this point are likely under net metering or a qualifying facility and are not participating in the SMART program due to the declining blocks. So here is an example of what a customer's bill would look like if they were to overgenerate. You can see here their on-bill credit for overgenerating. Their net metering credit would show up here at 22.827 cents for this particular bill period that this customer was under for this example. Their total usage here, they overgenerated and they receive an on-bill credit for that overgeneration. And that on-bill credit is based on the distribution, transition, transmission, and National Grid basic service rates. Next slide. And here is an example of a customer who undergenerated. So in this case, this customer did not produce more generation than their load at the site for that particular bill period. And that customer is not going to see, unless they're under the SMART program, they're not going to see any type of generation data on their bill. All they're going to see is that their bill is 374 kilowatt hours. They're not going to see how much they generate or how much they use. They're going to simply see what the net total difference is on that month. But if they compared it to previous months, previous years prior to having solar installed, they would likely see some form of decline from what they had prior to having solar installed. But they will be charged based on their residential rates and for that energy that they used in excess of their generation for this period of time. And I will pass this back off to George for questions.
All right, thank you very much, Jared. All right, so we have some pre-submitted questions that we can go through. First, I'd like to say that there were a handful of questions that were kind of more data related that we don't have the information available to provide at this time. That doesn't mean we won't get you the answers. We'll more than likely answer some of those through the IIRG. But we'll go on to the first one, which was for JJ. What is the average cost of a new single phase transformer? And what is the typical size that National Grid is installing when upgrades are required?
Hey everyone. So a typical single phase overhead transformer can cost anywhere near $6,100, and that does not include any additional system modification work like pole work, reconfigurations, pole guying, and any other work that could be required when requiring a new transformer. For single phase pad mounted transformers, that cost varies greatly depending on the area, depending on the amount of civil work, depending on the age of the infrastructure that feeds that single phase underground pad mounted transformer. But typically when we were upgraded transformer, it's replaced with a 50 kVA 12240 volt single phase. Very rare times when we don't install a 50 kVA are for dedicated customers. Let's say there's a line extension a couple hundred feet away and that transformer only serves that customer. If a customer has like a 25 kVA system, we wouldn't provide a 50, we would provide a 25 kVA.
Thank you, JJ. The next one looks like it's for Jesse. Due to the larger lead times, I plan on submitting my application before purchasing equipment, inverter panels, etc. If I end up purchasing different equipment than what was provided on the application, parenthetically, equipment will still be the same size, just different manufacturers. What do I need to do?
Thank you for the question. So you would just enter in the change review, right? So we could update that manufacturer information on your assets in your documents.
Thank you, Jesse. Looks like our next question was when do we expect the net metering caps to be lifted? So regulatory changes that include things like net metering caps and other forms of eligibility, dependent on the DPU updating regulations that will align with the climate legislation. The process is being run by the DPU. It's docket number 21-100, so 21-100. But the DPU has not provided a timeline for issuing final order just yet, so we're in a holding pattern with you. JJ, another question for you. Is it possible to obtain a list of areas that are more prone to transformer upgrades and or study areas?
So it's two parts. So for study areas, yes, we have a list of group study areas that can be found on our group study map that's listed on our shareholder website. And the link is in one of our slides in the PowerPoint. And then again, when you go into that group study area, you just enter the address and it tells you if you're in a study area or not. For transformer upgrades, due to the volume that we see every day and the T-checks that we have to perform on all the applications coming in, we would need to actually go through the application process and do the preliminary screenings to determine what transformers would need upgrades. So that's not something that we'd be able to give anybody until we actually did a preliminary screening.
Yeah, and in the past, we would generally tell, because I know you're sending salespeople out there, right? And you're trying to figure out, like, is this one going to be an easy one? We generally tell people, have your sales force be diligent, right? If they pull up to a neighborhood that is littered with solar panels on every house, there's a high probability that there could be some type of distribution system modifications that are going to be required. But if they pull in and they only see one small system on somebody's house, it might be a good bet, right? So although there isn't a list there available because it would just be entirely too many, I think that there is an opportunity to maybe train the folks that are out there to be, looking at what's on that street, what's across the street from that person, from that home that you're speaking with. Jesse, another one for you. For Mass Smart projects, where can the work order or work request number be found?
Yep, thank you for the question. So you could find your Mass Smart work order under the related tabs on that case. And also once we issue that work order, we do send an email. The email goes out to that electrician role. So whatever is in that electrician role, that person will get that work order number in via email as well. So you can find it in related tabs on the case, or you're gonna and you're also gonna get an email with that work order number. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Rich Johnson, looks like we have one for you. Are you going to discuss projects greater than 250 kW? Is there an expedited process for projects greater than 250 kW?
So, the topic of 250 kW, that'll be covered in our next complex seminar later this year. And when a date is established, invites will be sent out, just a little information centered around that topic. There's no longer an expedited project case above 250 kW due to requirements for supplemental grounding modeling. This is due to aggregated generation throughout our service territory. So really anything 250 kW and larger needs an additional study. That has just happened through time. Back in the day, it used to be up to 500 kW, and just, due to saturation and working with our design teams, it's just, that's not a number that's reasonable right now in the expedited process. But all that'll be addressed in our next complex seminar later this year.
Thank you, Rich. There was a question that came in through the chat that I'll address, but generally speaking, we would prefer that you use the form so we can keep track of them. If customers are going through QF, when the 25 kW net metering cap goes through, can customers then change to net metering? So I think this question is if an application comes in today that does not qualify for net metering, but then is under the 25 kW net metering cap exemption when the tariff goes through, will the customer be able to change to net metering? As of right now, our understanding is yes, that is the case. Customers who are eligible for eligible customers would be customers who are under 25 kW. Our understanding is that yes, they would be eligible. Now, we just don't have a full understanding of what that process is going to look like. If there's going to require some type of action on the customer or developer's part to migrate those from QF to net metering, or if that will be just like an automatic type of thing. But more of those details are going to be coming out as docket number 21-100 becomes final. So it appears that may be our last question on the list here, or at least the last one that you put forward. So I wanted to go ahead and thank everyone for attending today. These slides and the answers to these pre-submitted questions or submitted during the webinar questions will be posted on our website. Generally, we get them out posted relatively quick. So I would anticipate that by the end of next week, they should be posted and available to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure speaking with all of you or presenting to you. And we hope to continue to be able to support you in any way possible going forward. Have a great afternoon and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.